Okay, hello everybody. I guess we'll get started. Feel free to come closer, join me up here. I feel like I'm a million miles away from everybody, so don't be shy. So hello, I'm Rachel Glazer, and I'm excited to speak with you today. And before I get into my talk today, and what is somewhat of a heavy subject, I have a few questions for you. First of all, why did the chicken cross the road? Because the chicken behind him didn't know how to socially distance. Did you hear the one about the two grandmothers who were bragging about their precious darlings? One of them says to the other, "Mine are so good at social distancing, they won't even call me." And whose idea was it to sing happy birthday while washing your hands? Now, every time I go to the bathroom, my kids expect me to walk out with a cake. All right, getting down to business. I'm here speaking on behalf of Jewish Family Service, where I work as a licensed social worker, providing counseling services to adults and adolescents. When I came on board at JFS, referrals came in slowly at first. And then suddenly things changed when the pandemic hit. The counseling phone line started ringing and it hasn't stopped. We soon found we couldn't keep up with demand. Our counseling team grew over the past year and we've more than doubled in size. With progress in efforts for COVID-19 vaccines, there is a light at the end of the pandemic tunnel. But as the health concerns are managed with vaccines, what's left behind is the impact of the pandemic on our psyche. As one public health official said recently, we don't have a vaccine for our mental health like we do for our physical health. There's no doubt COVID-19 was tough. It turned our world upside down and literally overnight. I had to figure out how to conduct telehealth counseling sessions for the first time in my life. And there was no easing into it. Every single client was going to be seen remotely. Life was stressful before the pandemic, but new challenges added to this. Isolation and loneliness hit young and old people alike. Children missed out on opportunities for social development. Lack of separation between work and home made it difficult to turn work off. While working from home, I noticed myself relaxing boundaries between personal time and work time and returning emails at all hours of the day. The pandemic disrupted routines. It forced us to stay home and made us realize how fragile life is. The devastating loss of life touched all of us. Drug relapses and substance abuse have spiked. And the collective trauma we experienced contributed to increased mental health challenges. I was initially asked to speak today about resilience. Resilience refers to bouncing back from disaster unchanged. But as I thought about this topic, what occurred to me is, can't we do better than simply bouncing back? As we start to emerge from the pandemic and get back to normal, let's discuss how certain lessons learned in the pandemic can influence our lives as we go forward. Let's talk about what our lives could look like if we would just give it a chance. Something psychologists call growth through adversity is a concept that can play a role in understanding how things might look slightly different as we begin to emerge. The essence of growth through adversity is about finding ways to learn from our hardships and focus on what matters. Growth through adversity doesn't mean that people should be grateful to have been through trauma. But the difficulty and pain we experienced can be an opportunity to reassess what's important to us. To quote a Stanford psychologist who researches in this area, If a building is toppled by an earthquake, we probably wouldn't reconstruct exactly what was there before. We'd build it back better. Cultivating growth through adversity is about setting up new habits. Instead of big gestures, these habits could mean the small, everyday behaviors that can lead to a happier, more connected and fulfilled life. We should incorporate these 5 practices into our daily lives. Number 1, pause before judging people who are different than yourself. Instead of focusing on those things you disagree with, try to be curious about other people's lives and ways in which their experiences might not be so very different than your own. Number 2, ask more questions. We often think about how we'd feel in someone else's shoes. Instead of imagining, try asking them directly what they're going through. Number 3, build kindness into your routine. Spend a little time and energy on somebody else. It could be something as simple as baking your famous chocolate chip cookies and sharing them with a lonely neighbor down the street. Number 4, use technology for something good. Reach out to that friend on social media that you know is struggling and just check in and see how they're doing. And finally, number 5, remember that kindness starts at home. And when you're struggling, show yourself some compassion. Consider opening up to friends and family and asking for help. Many of you know I broke my elbow 2 weeks ago. And in preparing for this talk today, and also having my daughter's upcoming graduation party and being physically limited, I've had to sort of wave the white flag and ask for and accept help from others. And sometimes that's okay. Okay, so as we're all rushing to get back to what we call normal lives, what other lessons did we learn in the pandemic that we should keep and even build on as we start to emerge? Here are some thoughts on those lines. In the lockdown, we realized we could be both effective and productive working from home. And we made work fit into our lives rather than the other way around. Being stuck at home with kids and juggling work wasn't easy, as many workplaces and schools suddenly closed. But work hours became more flexible as parents scheduled meetings around virtual classes and mealtimes for kids. Children Zoom bombing meetings became a common occurrence, and work calls taken with a child on the lap was suddenly okay, as we gave up trying to be perfect and we just tried to be human instead. I found that I really enjoyed meeting my coworkers' families as they went about their day in the background of our Zoom meetings. And the office came to mean anything from a bedroom to the playground. Our country fast-forwarded years in terms of what work looked like. Do we have to rush right back to the way it was before? Or can we keep bits and pieces going forward? In the pandemic, families who were living together spent much more time together. But even families separated by miles between them spent more screen time together as we checked in on each other, we cooked together, and celebrated milestones together. I enjoyed baking challah virtually with my mother and sister. And many of us shared Passover seders remotely, with an iPad joining us at the Seder table. And virtual bar and bat mitzvahs became the norm. And for everything from doctor's appointments to Rosh Hashanah services, everyone learned how to use Zoom. As we return to normal, can we continue to use a virtual connection in ways that it enhances our lives? possibly increasing accessibility to community events, or as a way to connect with loved ones who are far away. In lockdown, there was an emphasis on self-care. For some, that meant journaling. Others started taking daily walks or long hot baths. Self-care was no longer seen as an indulgence, but something that we simply needed to do to just get by. And people picked up new hobbies, which helped improve mood and decrease stress. My teenage daughter started hammocking with her friends, bringing hammocks to local parks, stringing them up between two trees. In the pandemic, we prioritized mental health, and people sought counseling in record numbers. Many people turned to telehealth counseling, a trend that increased accessibility and convenience. People talked more honestly around mental health, which will go a long way to reducing the stigma that surrounds getting help. The pandemic helped break down barriers around counseling as people spoke more openly about the collective trauma that we were experiencing. As we emerge from the pandemic, can we carry with us this newfound acceptance of our own mental health needs and those of others? The lockdown forced us to get out of our comfort zone and to be more flexible. We learned new ways of doing things. Gyms closed, and many of us took up more traditional styles of exercise. Families hiked together, and new bikes became scarce around the country as people took to two wheels. My workout group went virtual. We met on Zoom, and we continued to socialize with each other while getting exercise as we had done before. We just did it from the comfort of our living rooms. Virtual workouts opened up group exercise to a wider audience by increasing accessibility and affordability. We've all heard the news that our planet's health improved in the pandemic, and the dip in global carbon emissions as flights and our daily commutes were canceled led to an improvement in air quality. In big cities, when people did go out, they walked or they cycled more in order to avoid public transportation. My usual very, very frequent trips to Wegmans were reduced to one large weekly trip. People had less waste overall because they consumed what was bought since we shopped so infrequently. Business travel became non-existent, and virtual conferences were the norm. While these trends are already reversing as travel has become safer, the pandemic proved that we can be kinder to our planet and think twice before getting in a car or on a plane. Here's some noise behind me. Remember the global 7 p.m. applause for our healthcare workers? Remember how grateful we felt to see a ray of sunshine in our gray Rochester winters? Or for any random act of kindness, like a stranger's smile behind their mask? Yes, I know you're asking yourself, how can you tell that stranger is smiling if they're wearing a mask? But you can tell. The darkness of the pandemic and universal suffering helped us see the good things that happened in a new light. And we appreciated what we had taken for granted. We focused more on others, checking in on them, buying groceries for those more vulnerable. Communities came together to share food and supplies, and we felt united against a common enemy. The pandemic has repeatedly shown that along with such hardship, there's been incredible kindness. More people have been giving of themselves, whether it's donating to an important cause or cheering on those who serve the public. Thanks to your generosity, Jewish Family Service was able to address many needs in the pandemic in the Jewish community. Here are just a few highlights. We delivered over 1,000 meals in a box to Jewish families. The Groceries to Go program saw countless volunteers shopping for and delivering groceries to our most vulnerable population. 40,000 pounds of food were collected. We've been providing 3 complimentary counseling sessions to all new clients. We created a telephone hotline that helps the public navigate the COVID landscape. And we distributed thousands of dollars to individuals in need of emergency financial assistance. A collaboration between Women's Philanthropy and JFS raised over $25,000 for holiday baskets. And finally, Jewish Federation's Human Services Fund raised $480,000, which was used in partnership with JFS to meet local needs. How about a round of applause? I mean, we raised all this money. So thank you. But usually after a disaster occurs and people return to normal and their normal lives, they tend to forget about the community they cared for. Let's not allow our newfound empathy to disappear. Let's continue to feel this empathy inspired in all of us. Going forward, can we make community service more routine in our lives? Can we be less judgy with others? Can we ask more questions to understand different viewpoints and continue to reach out to those we know are struggling? Can we take all these lessons learned over the past 15 months and expand on them as we return to normal? Let's continue to connect with distant family members when we can't be together. And maybe explore working 1 day a week from home and keeping the kids home from daycare. Let's keep moving towards seeing mental health challenges as we do physical challenges. And don't allow the stigma to return. Let's lobby for telemental health insurance to continue after the pandemic. And let's consider the planet when making everyday decisions in our lives. And don't give up on our new hobbies as we find our lives getting busier. Those hobbies are good for your mental health. Ultimately, life will never be exactly the same. There's been a huge loss of life and suffering all over the world, and that impact will be felt for years to come. But for those of us getting back to normal, this is a chance to redefine for ourselves what normal means. Let me leave you with a quote from Anne Frank. How wonderful it is, this quote always makes me cry. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. So thank you very much.